So in light of some recent events, I want to talk about mental health. And this is very much going to be a talking head. So you can skip past this, you can listen to it in the background, listen to while you're driving, whatever. But I wanted to talk about it because mental health is very much taboo in our industry, but more largely in our society, especially with people our age or older. The younger generation is a little bit different. But I wanted to share my story and share some of what I've been through in the hopes that it'll help somebody avoid going down the path that I've seen others take. And I'm not looking for anything out of this, like a pat on the back or any of those things. It's just more so, I just feel like it's a conversation that we need to have or be able to have, especially among men. And this is something that I've never talked about openly. And for some of you who follow me, who are family or close friends, this will be the first time you're hearing of this. So this is going to be fun. So back when I was a pastor, I used to ride bikes to stay in shape. And I was in an accident. I got hit by a car, landed on my head and shoulder, had a TBI. So from my TBI, there were some issues with speech and with my memory. They were minor issues and they got better fairly quickly. But the lasting effect of it was me ending up in depression. And depression for me was a lot like a fog. And so that's the way I always try to describe it to people, is that when you see a fog rolling in, it starts out pretty light. You can see just normal, right? And then eventually things slowly get cloudier and cloudier or foggier, and it's harder to make things out in a distance. And then eventually, as the fog gets thicker, if you've ever been in a really dense or thick fog, it's so hard to see that you can't make out things across the street. And then sometimes you can't even see things that are directly in front of you, like that you could reach out and touch. And that's, at its worst point, that's what it felt like. You just couldn't see up or down. There was no direction. There was no future to look forward to. You kind of forget about the past. You just feel kind of stuck. And at first, it's not such a big deal, right? I mean, you slowly come into this. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's a slow thing that happens. And then by the time you realize it, you're like, okay, I'm in this kind of weird situation that I've never been in before, and I don't really know how to deal with it. And at first, it's not a big deal. But, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and for some people, months turn into years. And sitting in that fog for that long without being able to see a future, without being able to remember past things, or just being able to see anything around you, makes you feel hopeless. It makes you feel helpless. It's overwhelming. And it's something that if you've never had to deal with it before, you don't know what to do. And it can make you want to give up. And that's how I felt. In the darkest parts of my depression, I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up on everything, on my marriage, my family, my friends, my work, life. There was nothing to look forward to. And I was so blinded by the darkness around me that I couldn't see any kind of hope or future in any of those things. And when you don't have that, it feels helpless and hopeless. And it reached a point where I finally was able to talk to some people about it, close friends and close family, and begin to start addressing it. I did go to therapy. I did get on medication. There's no quick fix, right? Like you don't hop into depression one day and hop out the next day. It's a slow occurrence over time getting into it, and it's a slow occurrence getting out. And I think the same is true with any other mental health issue, whether that be PTSD, anxiety, whatever it may be. And I share all this because I think after talking to a lot of guys who have been in the military and just been in different law enforcement jobs, there's a lot of similarities there, because one of the issues that I had that caused my depression was my TBI from the traumatic brain injury. And a lot of guys who are in the military, who are officers, deal with TBIs, whether they go diagnosed or undiagnosed. You can get a TBI from microbursts over time. So through my injury, I was able to learn a lot about the brain. I learned how much we don't know about the brain. But being around concussive blasts can lead to a TBI, and you don't realize it. And it accumulates over time. So it doesn't have to be a big blast. It can be a lot of small blasts, like if you're standing next to a muzzle for hours at a time every day. It can be from big blasts, from mortars. It can be from IEDs. It can be from all kinds of things. And even guys who are stateside, who are law enforcement. If you're on a entry team and you're a breacher, or you're at the front of a stack consistently and you get those blasts over time, you can end up with a TBI or with symptoms from it. And so it caused a chemical imbalance in my brain, and that was part of what led to my depression. The other side of that I didn't know at the time, that I didn't understand and find out until later as I started to come out of it, was that a big part of my depression was my job change. So I'm leaving being a pastor. I ended up in a job at a warehouse, and the thing that I struggled with was not the job that I was doing, but it was that I felt like I no longer had worth. So I'd spent, most of my life was built around and spent working for the church and building 2 church plants, and all of a sudden that was gone. And there was this vacuum, and it felt like there was no longer a need for me in the church. The church no longer had a use for me, and so I felt useless. I felt there was no value for me to bring to the church or to anyone in general. And again, in that dark time, I remember feeling like if there's no use for me and I bring no value to the table for anybody, then I'm wasting resources, right? Like I'm taking oxygen away from other people who could be doing great things for this world, and I'm just sitting here doing nothing. And that was tough. And I've talked to some guys who have come back from overseas, and it's a similar thing, because you're so used to this regimented lifestyle and having a mission and having a plan and having a thing to do every day, and then all of a sudden that just switches off one day, and then you're thrown into this other world. And it's kind of like guys who come out of prison. They're so used to a lifestyle in prison that once they get out, it's very foreign to be in this kind of life, and they long to go back. And I hear that from guys in the military too. And it's a very dynamic situation, especially for guys in the military, because you have that where, like, you have this mission, you have this lifestyle, but then you also have the mental toll and stress of war. And there's a really good book called On Killing, and I've talked about it before, but it's the psychology of what happens to the human psyche when we have to go to war or when we have to kill. And there's a lot of things he talks about in there, so I would highly encourage you to read that book if you're interested in it. But one of the things he talks about is how, when you look at historically in past wars, like World War I and World War II, that there was this period of time where after guys got out of the war, they would spend weeks or months to get back to the U.S. because of how they had to transport soldiers. But because of that, they had this time as a community who had been in this traumatic situation of war. They had been in it together. So you had this community, this brotherhood, that could then decompress together, where you weren't alone, and you had a community that you could kind of talk about, or even just understand that the people around you were there who had been through what you've been through. And then when they were brought back from those wars, they were treated as heroes. There was parades, and people welcomed them. People celebrated them coming back. And you fast forward to where we are now. The wars feel ongoing for forever. They feel never ending. And the op tempo is so high. And then also, because of advancements in transportation, you're in and you're on, and then you're back within 24 to 48 hours. And sometimes it may take longer, but you can be back stateside very quick and thrown back into a normal lifestyle. And there's no time to decompress or process what you've just been through or what you've just had to do. And I know there's some guys like, well, I don't need, but it does. It takes a toll on the human psyche, whether you want to admit it or not. And that's why I recommend go read the book, because it's the only book on psychology, or at the time, I don't know if it still is, but it's the only book on psychology written by somebody who's actually killed. So it does take a toll on the human psyche. And you need that time, you need that space, you need that community. And without that, you start to see these issues that become PTSD, depression, anxiety, especially in guys in our industry. And I think the biggest thing for guys now, whether you're suffering from PTSD, whether you're just suffering from depression or anxiety, whatever it is, for me, as I started to come out of that, what brought me out of that was just, I can't pinpoint like a moment. I can't say, yep, this was the turning point. I just remember feeling like I had hit rock bottom, and I knew I had to make the choice to either give up, or I could fight through in the hopes that I would come out of it. And at the time, I was still in a point where I didn't see a way out. And I relate a lot to when I hear guys talk about selection, or they talk about what they had to get into to go through like SF, or when guys talk about like Hell Week and things like that, when they say, you just have to have the mentality to not quit and to just make it to the next thing. And you have to break it down into these smaller steps of making it to the next meal or making it through the next whatever. And I relate to that on a level because mentally that's what I had to do in that time. It was, make it to breakfast, and then make it, to the next meeting, make it to lunch, make it to whatever, make it to whatever that next thing was so that I could make it through the day. And it was just every day doing that and never knowing if you were going to come out in the end, but being in a situation where I was committed to battling out. And I know like you hear this and it's like, dude, you worked in an office or you worked in a warehouse or whatever, but that's how mentally taxing mental health can be, especially depression and PTSD and anxiety. It literally feels like a battle, like a daily battle. And for me, I was committed to fighting. I was gonna continue to fight as long as I could. And I know there's some guys who fight and, don't make it out. And just like any battle, just like any war, you don't always win. And it's unfortunate, but we have to be there to help each other through these moments. And we can learn from these battles individually and as a community. And so I was committed to trying to make it out. And I just kept doing the thing every day, right? And just trying to make it to that next thing. I was going to counseling. I was on medication. I had to try like 3 or 4 different medications to find the right one for me, because there is no like, hey, here's the perfect medication for everyone. So it took time. It took months to come out of it. And eventually I remember it felt like the fog was lifting. It felt like when the sun starts to burn off the fog in early morning or midday, and you start to see light again. And I remember there was one day we were just driving down the road, and I turned to my wife and I said, I think I'm starting to come out of it. I think the fog is lifting. I started to have hope again. And I just started to look forward to a future. I could actually see a future. And I started to recognize the things around me, and it just I didn't feel stuck anymore. And it took time, and it, having been through it now, there are still moments of darkness, but once you've been through it, you know how to battle it, and you know how to get through it, or how to at least fight. And so like for some people, every day's a fight. Just making it through the day is a win. And I know for some people it's worse than others. And I know because a lot of guys don't talk about it, most people will never know. They can look happy, they can have all the things, and have people from the outside look and go, you have no reason to be depressed. Like you have money, or you have the job you want, or you have the wife or the kids that you want, or the car, whatever. They can look at those things and go, I don't understand. But that's the thing. It's not always about the external things. It's about there's this imbalance inside that has to be corrected. And I think a lot of guys I know that are in law enforcement and have been ex-military have no issue going to the doctor for TRT, right? Because the job you're in is extremely stressful, and it wears on you, and it depletes your adrenal glands, it depletes the chemicals in your body, and so they run low on testosterone, so they have to get testosterone injections to be balanced out to do the job they do. But they don't think to check to make sure they're mentally balanced to be where they need to be. And because the brain is so unique, there isn't a really easy way to do that. But it is something that we need to continue to check on to make sure that we're healthy, so that we can be in a better position, not just for work, but just for ourselves, like just to live and have a quality of life. If I could say anything to those of you who may be struggling with PTSD, with depression, with anxiety, I would say, one, I would want you to know you're not alone, right? There are some of us who have been through it or been through something similar, and we're here to walk with you through that, whatever that may look like. Paul Akobe has been doing, he hasn't talked about it, but he's been doing a ton behind the scenes. I'll link him down below. He talks about men's mental health quite a bit, and he's been on his own journey, and it's been awesome to see what he's been doing and to talk with him about it, like back and forth, just the conversations we have. But know that you're not alone. Know that there are people around you. And I would say go It's okay to not be okay. It's okay that there's something wrong, but it's not okay to stay there. So talk to someone, whether that's a close friend, talk to your doctor, go to counseling, talk to your wife, talk to your girlfriend, whatever. Talk to someone and begin to take those steps to try to work your way out of it over time and be willing to do what it takes. Just like if we, like I said earlier, like if you had cancer, you would do whatever you had to do to combat cancer. In the same way, I think that mental health is just as serious. So do whatever you got to do to combat it, to come out of it better on the other side, and to be there for those around you. And I think the biggest motivator for me was when I understood that I was valued just for being me, right? That the only thing that you have to do is just be you. And what I mean by that is that, like, as photographers, right, there's everybody in the world is a photographer because of smartphones, but there's only one you, and only you have the perspective of the world that you have. We can have 1,000 photographers all photograph the same thing, and we're all going to take a different photo because of our life experiences, because of where we're at, our perspective. All those things are all going to be different. In the same way, you bring you to the table, and that's it. And you don't have to bring anything besides that. It's simply you. Like, despite whatever your friends may have jokingly told you, you're not here by accident and you're not here by incident. So you have a purpose in this world, and only you can do that. Some of us can do some of the same things, similar things, but only you can do that. Only you can be you. None of us can replace you or be you. So it's important that you are still here for us. I would tell you, just take it one step at a time, just one day at a time, one moment at a time. Just make it to that next thing. And last thing, I know I've rambled on for far too long, but like, if any of you guys are struggling, reach out. I'd be happy to help. Or if you're far away and I can't really be there, try to put you in contact with somebody who can be there for you. If any of you have someone who's going through it, for me personally, what was most helpful was people just being there. They didn't have to talk to me about anything. They didn't have to try to be my therapist. They didn't have to try to make sure, my best friend, David, amazing guy. He's been with me to Middle East. He's been with me to Central America. We've been all over the US together. He's helped me with a ton of things. He's always there for my family. Anytime we need anything, he's there. But he was just there for me as a friend. He would just come and hang out and sit, and that's it. We didn't have to talk. We didn't have to do anything specific. He was just there. And me knowing that I wasn't alone, that I had someone who was there, who was just, their presence made me know that I wasn't alone. He wasn't expecting anything of me. He wasn't asking anything of me. It was just his way of letting me know that he was there. And that was the biggest help for me, was having that person. So if you have a spouse who's going through it, if you have a friend who's going through it, the biggest thing you can do is just be there for them. From my experience, I mean, everybody's going to be a little different, but from my experience, that's the biggest thing. Because right now I can open my phone and almost every message or phone call I have or email is going to be somebody wanting something. Hey, can you do this content? Hey, can you make this video? Hey, can you come help me with this thing? Hey, what do you recommend for this? And the list goes on and on and on. And it's all things that people want from you. And it feels like at times that you're only wanted for what you can offer. And it goes back to what I said. So having somebody who's there, who makes you feel like all they want from you is you, makes it a lot easier to battle through every day, because you feel like you're underperforming in everything else in life. But that's my story, and I hope that helps some of you guys. I hope that it makes it easier for some of you to have hard conversations about it. And if there's anything I can do to help any of you, please feel free to DM me or email me, and I'll do everything I can to help. So that sucked.